Hey friends, welcome to Flight Test Tech. I'm Josh. Today we're going to be showing you how to build the fuselage of our Scout XL. Now in this video, you're going to basically be able to assemble with me exactly what you see here. This is going to be our main fuselage and our tail. The tools that we're going to need for assembling this are going to be a hot glue gun, a straight edge, a triangle square, some tape, and a razor blade. All these tools are included on our new Crafty Kit V2. Let's go ahead and get our materials in order and we'll get started. So the first process in building our Scout XL is going to be doing the fuselage. Now the fuselage, as you can see, is quite large. What I'd like you to do first is to gather all the pieces you see here. We're going to weed them out as we need to, and then we're going to come back and start assembling. The main pieces we have here is the front and rear of our fuselage. We have our inside doublers that are going to connect through a C-fold. We have our bottom plate, and we also have our servo doublers. Once we're done with this, we're going to then move on to the turtle deck, but we'll worry about that step later because as you can see, our table's nice and full. Let's go ahead and start the weeding process. What we have here is our Crafty Kit knife that's included with our Crafty Kit, and you can see that I've already dulled the tip of the knife here, so as I cut, it will not cut through the bottom layer of paper. This can simply be done with a coarse piece of sandpaper, or if you have a sidewalk or a garage floor, you can scrape the tip against the floor and dull it out yourself. Anytime you're weeding out the foam, an easy way to do it is to fold into a 180-degree angle. That will expose the foam on both sides, and then simply a little bit of a rotation is all you need, and it'll roll right out for you. Let's go ahead and do score cuts all along all the areas that need to be weeded. So if you followed along and weeded out the plane with me, you can see that we have all of our main pieces not only weeded, but also areas where the foam had to be removed, we removed them as well. Now feel free to pause the video, take as long as you need. Make sure that your cavities are nice and clean. If any of the foam stays in those cavities, simply take a razor blade and carefully scrape them and remove them so all these channels can easily bend up to a 90-degree angle. Once you're done with this, unpause the video and we'll move on to our next step. Now that we have our pieces weeded, we're going to carefully stack these up nice and neat to make sure we have plenty of room to work on our main fuselage pieces that you have here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to flip this over on the back and we're going to apply some tape on these three pieces right here. Again, I'm going to be using the tape from my Crafty Kit. It's a nice little dispenser here, and this tape is crazy sticky. If you want to do it the easy way, one long piece is all we need. And we'll go ahead and just lay this out, splitting the difference between one side and the other. Now what we can do is we can delicately lift this up, and I'm just going to let this overlap just like you see here, and I'm taking my time making sure that all the edges line up perfectly. And if it's slightly off, don't worry, it'll be just fine. But when we flip this over, what we should see is that these channels line up perfectly with each other, and they do. Next, we're going to be applying glue to glue the front half and the back half together. Now with our FT300 glue gun, you're going to notice that we have an adjustable temperature down below here. We have low and high. A natural tendency may be to crank this sucker all the way up, but what the high setting is actually for is for whatever you're gluing wood together. It basically makes the glue very, very hot and borderline boiling. You don't want that for your foam board. You actually want this to be set right at medium or even just a little bit below. This has tremendous capacity even on a large airplane like this. And also what it has is great properties where it's not going to make the glue bubble and it'll give you a good strong joint. Now we have our temperature set. I got my glue stick in. All I need to do is apply a bead of glue right on these bottom edges. And I'm going to be keeping a scrap piece of foam right by me so I can scrape off any excess when I clamp this shut. There we go. And then I just got a little scrap piece of foam here. Now it's really important whenever we're gluing these two halves shut, notice that I'm putting weight on both sides of the fuselage. This is so it's going to dry nice and flat. If I have any excess glue, just smear it over my seams. If you've built along with me in the past, you know I always start and stop my glue about 1/4 inch from the edge, and that way it doesn't squeeze out on both ends. We're going to give this about 30 to 40 seconds to fully dry, and then we're going to move on to our next step, which is simply cutting the tape off of these areas that you see here. I can take my razor blade here, and I can flip this around to the sharp edge. I always like to have one dull edge and one sharp edge. Just drag this up against the foam, and out comes our tape. While we're working on this main section of the fuselage, let's go ahead and make it even stronger by adding these doublers. Now in the past here, I've had A doublers and B doublers on the inside of the fuselage. What I did here to make it even more simple so we don't forget it, like yours truly in some build videos in the past, is I put a C-fold on the bottom. A C-fold is simply where both sheets are going to fold over 180 degrees, and it gives you a beautiful finish, and by the way, it's very strong edge on the bottom. All we simply need to do is make sure that this will properly fold over. It's not resistant too much. You don't have any buildup of foam. Once you're happy with that, we're going to apply a bead of glue on the smaller of the two formers so we don't accidentally get glue where we don't need it, and also a very thin ribbon on the very bottom of the paper. Fold that over 180 degrees. And I'm going to concentrate fully on just making sure that where the doubler meets right here is nice and flush. And then also on the very bottom here, I'll rotate this around for you, of this doubler, that this area is nice and flush as well. Once we have that, we can hold that down, give it a good 30-40 seconds, and then do the same process on the other side. All right, same process now on the other side. We always do a test fit, whether it looks perfect or not. This gives us the muscle memory we need just to make sure that we're training our eyes and our hands to go exactly where they need to go when we glue it down. That looks great. Plenty of glue in the hot glue gun. Again, we're going to trace that perimeter around. A little bit right there is good, and then a thin bead. Keep in mind with that paper, it will pass the temperature through a lot easier, so don't burn yourself by pressing against that too hard. Again, we're making sure that the bottom of the wing is nice and flush, and also the bottom surface of the doubler up here. Now that we have our doublers folded over, we're going to go ahead and give them a quick test fit. You're going to notice here that I have an etch marking on the very bottom where this needs to go. We're going to do a quick test fit and make sure we're happy with where that's placed. What we should have is when we put the bottom seat of the wing up against the bottom seat of the fuselage wing portion, it's going to line up perfectly, and those etch marks are going to line up all the way around, right along with that. Also keep in mind, you're going to have roughly the thickness of one piece of foam on the very top here, and that's very important, so when we do our B-fold, this doesn't block it from folding in 90 degrees. It's also really important we make sure we have plenty of hot glue for this step, because you don't want to peel this up and try to do it again later. Now that we're happy with the way that everything looks and fits, we're going to do one last step, and that's to simply place our fingers down right along this etch line right here and lift this up. Don't worry if there's a little bit of a wrinkle back where the floats may go. This is just going to help this relax a little bit so the taper of the fuselage isn't locked down nice and flat. Whenever we're working with right sides and left sides, it's always a good idea to make sure that you place one side on and then the other side on, and that way you never get them backwards by accident. Now we're going to lay this down right into place. There's one, there's two. Again, you can see that crease that we did is going to allow this to have nice, easy form. It's not going to fight it. It's very important to make sure your fuselage has a nice, crisp bend where it needs a taper to make it even. Now that that's dry, let's go ahead and go on to our other side. Again, we're going to check the fit, make sure we're happy with it. Lines up on the edges beautifully. And we're also going to put our two fingers right along that crease. We're going to lift it up, allowing it to kind of establish that angle it's going to need when it rotates up. And also make sure this can crease up as well too. That looks wonderful. Let's go ahead and glue that down. You're going to notice that our glue sticks are a milky white. In the past, we warned against milky white glue sticks, but this is actually a milky white and very hard because it's a special mix with a lot of binders in it. That means if you live in a hotter climate, this is going to come unglued if it's sitting in your car that's real hot or deformed in any way. This is a special glue mix we've had for a few years now. It works absolutely amazing. It's about the same price as if you went to Walmart. So if you're ordering a kit, make sure you pick up a couple packs of glue as well. You won't regret it, especially working with it. Now that we have our front doublers glued down, let's go ahead and put our attention towards the rear doublers. Now both these rear doublers you're going to see are the exact same. It doesn't have our left or right. What you will notice is the placement of our servos. One is higher than the other, and that's so the servos can easily go under and over each other. All we simply need to do is line it up with the etch lines, make sure we're happy where they're placed, and then we're going to glue them down. I'm going to take care to keep this a little bit spaced away from where the notches are going to be, just because one's going to be higher than the other. And a little wiggle is all we need. Set that down, lined up with the etch marks. And there we go. Same process on the other side. Always do a quick test fit, make sure we're holding it right. That looks great. And there we go. So just for a quick recap here, we have our front doublers on that have been C-folded and glued in place. We have our rear servo doublers on. Now's the time where we're gonna start practicing our B-fold. Now to make sure you have these 90 degrees, it's real easy to take a triangle square. Again, this is included in our crafty kit. Very easy to use. We wanna make sure that when we bring these up, we're bringing them up to a true 90 degrees. If it's pressed in too much or too little, especially on these bigger airplanes, it's gonna be very difficult to push that out or push it in. So make sure that we have this handy because we're gonna be using this a lot. I'm gonna start with the back side here first so we can see it real easy, but basically a B-fold is where the side plate is beside the bottom or the top plate. And if you look at the cross section right here, you're gonna see exactly how it needs to go. To do a bottom B-fold, we're gonna leave a bottom plate firmly against the table and we're gonna rotate the side plate up 90 degrees. Once you have this up 90 degrees, we're gonna make sure we press evenly against the table so we get a nice crisp hard edge. It may be a temptation to kind of hold this in the air and to try to fiddle with it like this. It's not gonna give you good results, and oftentimes you'll get a twist in your fuselage or not get an A-fold or a B-fold. So let's go and practice that one more time. And as you can see, I can easily bring this up against the back part of the fuselage with that taper nicely defined. That looks wonderful. I'm running low on glue, so I'm gonna keep this right where it needs to be. And I'm gonna go ahead and first place my bead of glue right on the bottom of this doubler here. And I'm gonna focus my glue mainly on the side of the bottom piece. And I'm just gonna go all the way through. Look at that, just had enough right there. We're gonna rotate this up 90 degrees. Notice I'm looking at my alignment all the way through. Now I can take my square. I'm just gonna hold that with my thumb, making sure it's firmly against the table. If you don't have a T-square, another real easy solution is maybe a rattle can of paint or even a quart can of paint, or even if you have to, you can use a roll of tape to hold up against that. Just make sure you don't have anything that makes the tape crooked. All right, that looks good. You notice sometimes when I'm holding things down, I give it a little wiggle. That's just to make sure I don't accidentally glue it against the table. Now that we have this side done, let's go ahead and test the other side. Whether we built one plane or 100 planes, I always make sure that we discipline ourselves to try the fold first. That looks really good. Nothing fighting there. Focus the bottom bead here. And again, I'm putting the majority of the glue on the very side of this piece. And that way it'll squeeze out into the paper and glue that down nice and neat, but also it's putting the strength where it needs to be. And I'm stopping about 1/4 inch from the edge. Now we're gonna roll this up. Looking at the back of my former here, making sure we get that nice into place. Looks good. And you're gonna see now when we flip this over, we have a nice sharp crisp seam on the very top, and this is all flat as well. Now that we folded our fuselage together, let's go ahead and put some attention towards these two pieces of paper on the front. These are basically foldovers. It will give you more strength, but it'll also give you a very nice finished look. To do this, I'm just gonna cut a little tiny notch right here, and that's gonna allow this to fold over and then fold in. Now that we have that, I'm gonna put a healthy bead of glue right on the bottom. You can put a little bit on the paper if you want. And then I can take the scrap piece of foam. We're gonna fold it over 180 degrees, let the glue squeeze out. Notice I'm kind of using that foam kind of like a paintbrush. We're gonna fold that down and fold that in. Don't worry about the excess glue, it's completely fine. It's actually gonna give you a little bit of a rubbery texture, so when you slide your power pod in, it's gonna grip it. Let's go ahead and do the exact same process now on the other side. I'm just gonna kind of cut a notch the width of the foam here. There we go. Quick test fold, make sure everything lays over nice and neat. And then just like before, bead of glue, a little bit on the paper. Take the clean side of our scrap piece of foam here, fold it up 180 degrees. I usually like to count to 10. And then we can fold that over. Let the excess glue squeeze out. So So one of the really good things about the Scout XL is we don't have to install our servos ahead of time and all the push rods inside. The servos are mounted on the back side and we can easily wire that later. Now what we can move on to do is to put the bottom plate of our fuselage in place. Let's go ahead and get those pieces, we'll position them, talk about it, and then glue it in. With the bottom of the fuselage, we're going to work from the back to the front. And the very first piece that we're going to position in here is going to slide in right here and go clean to the edge, just like that. Again, it's really good to kind of practice your folds, because what we're going to do is once we glue this in place, we're going to flip this over on the table, use the table as our friend, and press it down while holding in there. That'll keep it nice and flat and also keep us from burning our hands. So that fits beautifully. Now that we're happy with that fit, again, we're going to make sure we have plenty of hot glue in our glue gun. We're going to focus our glue right between the paper and the foam on both sides. I always like to kind of start early and slide it into place just like that. Take your time and position. You have plenty of time to work on it. You're going to notice that the hot glue kind of holds it into place. Once we're happy, we can flip this over and hold it down. When you're holding this down, make sure you put pressure evenly with the flats of your hands along the whole back plate of the fuselage. Just working up. Don't push in with your fingertips, just soft pressure, both down against the table and in towards the foam. A little wiggle, make sure we don't accidentally glue it into place. And after 30 seconds, looks good. Now this front piece is a little bit different because we're gonna start a bend up in the front here. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna crack this open and we're gonna remove this piece. We can use this for wiping some scrap glue later. And we're also going to establish a bevel right where the score line is right here. Now that we have all these pieces weeded on, just like before, we're going to do a quick test fit. You can notice this back piece shingles over very nicely, and we'll just work from the back, making sure it's pushed firmly against the back plate. And if we do everything right, it should drop right down into place. And then this extra paper here is going to be used to seal off the bottom edge. That looks wonderful. Now I like to try to take this in two different chunks. So first we're going to do this chunk here and glue it in place, and then we'll rotate this up, we'll put glue on, and then we'll flip that down into place. That way we don't have too much to handle at one time. Just like before, starting and stopping about 1/4 inch from the edge. There's one side, there's two sides, and I'm also going to do the back side here as well. Be ready with that scrap piece of foam to squeeze any excess that you may need out. And just like before, I'm going to slide this into place. Press that down very delicately. Use a scrap piece of foam, kind of smooth that out. Didn't put quite enough in there, I'll just put some glue later. Let's flip this over against the table. And I'm also going to push that in. And this time I'm dragging the fuselage a little bit this way, so the natural tendency is to only get tighter on the back side of the fuselage. Okay, there's 30 seconds. That looks great. Now we'll flip this over 180 degrees, and we have a lot of doubler space right here that we're going to be able to put this on. So let's go ahead and make sure we have plenty of hot glue. We're going to put our glue on the doublers. And just like before, glue on one side and glue on the other side. Even just put a little ribbon of glue if you want on the very front here. This front nose is going to take a lot of beatings. Just tap it down into place. There we go. If there's any excess that we got to get rid of, we can easily scrape that off. Then back against the table. Count to 10, move it a little bit. Count to 10, move it a little bit. And again, I'm pressing inwards as I'm moving back. Don't worry if there's any unsightly glue that pops out. Just a simple roll down with your fingernail will oftentimes scrape it right off. All right, that looks really good. Let's go ahead now and move towards the very front piece here. This is something we can use a table or a scrap piece of foam. I'm just going to use a table here. We'll fold this up 180 degrees, and we'll put a bead of glue on all three of those doublers, the outer fuselage and the two inner doublers. And with a rolling motion, rotate that up, keep going. And once it's flat, we're gonna press down and then give it tension just by moving it across the table. Now you can see that there's a horseshoe line right here, and where that should line up with is pretty much exactly where our doublers are. All we need to do is we can take our triangle square, we can line that up, keep this line parallel, and just with a couple cuts, cut down to the bottom. You can then just let it glide through the paper. You can always trim that if it needs a little bit more trimming. And we'll do the same process now on this side. Get this parallel. There we go. And if you find that you need to do a little bit of trimming to get it firmly against the doubler, that is totally okay. And you can now see we have a nice finished edge all the way in the front. And our main section of our fuselage is now pretty much done. Let's go ahead and put this aside. We're gonna prep our turtle deck and get ready to install it. So the 6 pieces that you see in front of me here are the main pieces that are gonna make up your top turtle deck. We have our front top turtle deck, the center portion, and the rear portion. Now if you built a simple Scout or the mini Scout, you notice that those were all one piece of poster board. I split these into 3 pieces because in my opinion, I think it's just a little bit easier to manage. Also, we have our back doublers. These 2 are identical. These are our rear doublers, and this is our front doubler. Let's go ahead and prep all these pieces and also peel the paper from the areas we need to, and then we'll start gluing it together and forming it. Feel free to pause your video, make sure all your pieces look just like what you see here. Then our next step is going to be doing our C-folds and installing our main formers. With our 2 main rear formers here, we're just going to go ahead and do a quick test, make sure everything lines up. And when we fold this over 180 degrees, it's really important that you make sure that the outer surface and the lower surface by this notch lines up perfectly. Once you're happy, place a quick bead of glue right around the perimeter, a little bit on the bottom, fold it over 180 degrees, and just make sure it's nice and flat and hold it in place. And the same process for the other side. Place a quick bead of glue right around the perimeter, a little bit on the bottom, fold it over 180 degrees. Now that we have these glued in place, let's bring our fuselage back in and we'll install them into 2 main portions. Quick test fit is all you need. Doesn't matter which one it goes, they're both identical. And once you're happy with the fit, bead of glue on the very bottom here is all you need, and then press them down into place. Same process on the front. Bead of glue on the very bottom here is all you need, and then press them down into place. And then finally, our very front former here, which you can see has quite a bit of detail. We're gonna line this right up on the bottom. And then you're gonna notice that this front portion here is gonna fold under to give this a nice finished edge. Just gonna put a little bit of glue here so it squeezes out on the paper. Once we have that section on, we can place a little bit of glue on the back part of the paper, use a scrap piece of foam, and fold it over. Now that we have our main formers done, let's go ahead and prepare our top turtle deck here in all 3 pieces. This is going to require some forming and possible a little bit of bevel cuts in certain areas to give it a nice transition from the top turtle deck to the sides of the fuselage. Also, if you have a steel ruler, now would be a really great time to grab that and make sure you have your tape handy. Alright, to prepare our rear turtle deck, you're going to notice that the grain goes with the foam very easy, so it's very easy to bend. To make this even easier, we're going to go to the edge of the table, and if you've ever built any of John Overstreet's Master Series flight test planes, this step is going to be very familiar to you. All you simply need to do is use the edge of the table and give us a nice gentle round. Now the plan is to work from the back going forward with this. So we're going to take our fuselage back oftentimes, we're going to lay this over, and you're going to notice that the very top center mark should line up perfectly here. And as we roll this down, Our goal is to make everything line up beautifully. This back edge here is going to go ahead and sit flat. And an easy way to make this look as nice as possible is to use a ruler to hold it. So a real easy way to apply these turtle decks is to lock down one side with a piece of tape. Now this tape can be carefully removed later to give you a beautiful finished look. Also, this metal ruler is going to also help to hold a nice flat pressure on the other side. So you kind of have a table as your friend on both sides. The metal also cools the glue super fast. So I'll go ahead. There we go. And now I can come back here and I'm going to put this, and I'm going to line up my center mark right with the tab, and I'm going to go about 2/3 forward here on that former, just a little bit more forward than normal. You want to kind of keep a little bit of pressure up here. As I roll this down, get it into place. Once I'm happy with it on both sides, we'll hold this flat. You can now press that tape shut, and that looks great. Now that I have my tape, I can open this up like a door and I can apply glue where I need. And as I roll this over, I'm going to roll this part against the table flat, and the other side I'm going to hold down with the ruler. So again, I'm going to focus most of my glue right up against this edge right here. I'm going to go over this former, and then again, most of my glue going against the foam, starting and stopping about 1/4 inch. Now I go right back down like I did before, get this in place, use the table as my friend. Now with this ruler, I can just check my fit, and that looks wonderful. We're going to give this a good minute to fully dry here before moving this, because this piece is under tension. If anytime we remove this and we see that we want just a little bit more glue under here, no problem at all. All we simply need to do is put the tip of our glue gun under, use a very small amount. Again, back with our metal ruler. And the excess can easily be peeled up. There we go. And let's go to the other side now. And we can carefully remove this piece of tape if we want. Again, if this is a little bit loose, thin bead of glue is all we need. Back with our metal ruler. And she's down nice. Let's do the exact same process now on the next piece. And just like before, we're going to give this a nice form. The circle does make it a little bit more challenging, so take your time. I kind of work with both sides as if they're two separate pieces. And the final goal here is to make the pieces act as if they don't need to be stretched or pushed into place, but they naturally set into place. And the same process as before, we're going to use the undercut from the laser to kind of give us that benefit of letting it shingle over the other piece. So we're going to push that against it. That looks really good. And we can come back with a piece of tape, press it in. We're going to line up our little center points here. Get our alignment right where we like it. Here's that side. Oops. I like that. All right, I'm just about out of glue. We're gonna make sure we have another glue stick handy right here, so that way we can push that in when the time comes. We have our ruler ready. Let's open this up like a door. Nice healthy bead of glue. Gonna go right along the back edge here. And again, a healthy bead of glue on the bottom. Then get my new glue stick here. There we are. All right, back into place. I'm really putting most of my attention to make sure this back piece shingles really nicely so we have a nice finished edge. We can take it down against the table. We'll grab our ruler and we'll press that down. Give this plenty of time to dry. And just like the other piece, if we need to put a little extra glue, that's okay. Whenever we remove our tape, I like to just pull with the direction that it's folded over, and that way it doesn't peel up the paper, it just holds it down. All right, one piece left to go and test fit here, and that's this one. Don't try to get the complete shape all in one motion here. Notice I'm putting just a little bit extra attention here. If we ever had to, and we needed to kind of get a nice straight edge, we can use our rulers to give even pressure, get a nice sharp bend at the end. Now we can take it to our piece. Give it a quick test fit here. Once we're happy with everything, same process as before. Take our piece of tape. And lining up the center marks with the center marks. And once we have our marks again, we're going to go back to the same process as before. Just put a little bit more. There we go. Back edge, nice healthy bead of glue on the other doubler and on the front doubler, and then finally on the other side. There we go. And we'll fold that over. Always kind of take a note to where that center line is, making sure we're lining that up nice and neat. We have plenty of time to work with our glue. There we go. Now we can carefully remove our piece of tape. Nice and slow. And at this point, our turtle deck is now all finished here. We're ready to move on to our next step, and that's installing our tail feathers. Now that the main fuselage section is done, we're gonna go ahead and move on to our elevator and our rudder. The three pieces we're gonna need for this process is gonna be our main elevator, our rudder, and also the lower rudder doubler that you see right here. Let's go ahead and prep these with bevel cuts and also weeding out the areas that we need to, and then we can move on with assembly. Now for our bevel cut on this one, because we have a wooden doubler that's gonna go on here, we're gonna place our bevel cut on the elevator side. To do a proper bevel cut, if you have one of our Flite test knives, you can actually rotate it to have a detent like what you see here. And this is wonderful to act as kind of a guide to hold your blade in the proper orientation by letting this rest against the back side. All we're simply gonna do is we're gonna place the blade just above the paper, and we're gonna gently let it glide all the way through. Now don't worry if you accidentally cut through the paper in the middle at any time, you can always repair that with a piece of tape. The important thing is to make sure that you have no resistance whenever moving this down or up. If you have a lot of resistance, you may need to go through here and do it one more time. Also, a piece of sandpaper is really useful to be able to give yourself a beautiful clean bevel as well. Just makes a little bit more dust. Let's go ahead and do the rudder bevel. Let's go ahead and do a second bevel on our rudder side, and then we'll go back and reinforce it with some hot glue. Same process as before. Take our blade. Make sure your blade is just above the paper, as close as possible without going through. And then we'll check for rotation. That looks good. That looks good. Now that we have our bevel cuts done, we're going to reinforce it with a small ribbon of hot glue. We're going to make sure also we have a scrap piece of foam ready to scrape off any excess hot glue that we don't need. All we need to do is simply put the nozzle of the glue right over the paper and apply a thin bead of glue. Once we have that down, we can take our scrap piece and we can push in all the extra glue and also scrape off any excess. The goal is to put a nice even film between the foam, the paper, and then the other side of the foam. This is something that you can do with a scrap piece of foam and practice both your bevel cuts and your reinforcement hinges. By doing this is going to give you a tremendously longer life on your foam board airplane than not doing it. All right, same process on our elevator here. We're going to open this up. Again, we're taking the tip of our nozzle, applying a thin bead of glue right down over top of the hinge line. You can see it's not perfect. I'm wiggling like crazy because I had too much coffee. And again, scraping off all the excess. And then we're going to let it dry. Now let's go ahead and open up our little doubler for the rear part of our tail. And this is going to be much greater than a C-fold. You can see it has a little bit of slack. That's because it's going to glue and wrap right around this area that you see here. Just like that. The easiest way to do this is to do this one side at a time. We're going to apply a little bead of glue on one side. And they're both the same, so it doesn't really matter which side we put down first. We're going to press this into place, and we're going to hold it till it dries. Once that's dry, we can go ahead and go to the other side, and we're going to wrap this around and let it meet up right with the hinge line. The reason I did this is I wanted this to be a little bit stronger on the tail section, not have the back tail so skinny. And there we go. We're just going to hold that in place. Now that both our elevator and rudder have our hinge lines cut, we're going to move on to our elevator doubler. Now you're going to see a piece that looks just like what you see here, and this is our elevator doubler. Because this is such a large airplane, it's very easy for these to want to move independently of each other, and since we're only controlling on one side, we want to make sure that that torque is transmitted over to the other side. This piece of wood is going to do that for us. We're going to give this just a quick test fit here, make sure we're happy with where it lands. Just like that. And once we're happy with that, we'll glue it down. I like kind of smearing it around a little bit, and I just want to get this nice and flush on all the sides, and then we'll press it down into place. You're going to notice here a slot that's in your doubler here, and how I lined it up directly over the slot that was in the elevator. That's for our control horn to be able to pass through easily and also being reinforced. Easy way to test the fit, simply give it a rocking motion, and you're going to see that if you line this up perfectly, the holes of our control horn are going to be directly over our hinge line, which is exactly what we want. Once we're happy with the placement, we're going to take a bead of hot glue, we're going to press that right down into the crack, and we can press our control horn in. Now that we have our control horn installed, let's do a quick test fit of our rudder to make sure everything lines up. We're simply going to slide this in, rock it right over the slot, and press it down into place. Now would be a really good time to make sure that everything is nice and perpendicular, and it is. Now once we're happy with the way everything fits, I'm going to rock this up just the width of my glue gun, and I'm going to place a bead of glue right underneath the rudder. We'll rock that down into position again, and again we'll come back with our triangle square. We're going to hold that in place and let it fully dry. Now because this tail section is going to be taking a lot of beatings, after this is fully dried, I'm going to come back on both sides of the tail and reinforce it with a bead of hot glue. Now that our rudder is firmly in place, let's do a quick test fit on the fuselage by sliding the rudder down and lining up with the tabs for the elevator. Now it's really important that we not only have the elevator and the rudder perpendicular to each other, but it's also mounted onto our fuselage. So we'll just take our triangle square and we'll stick it right in between there, and that looks perfect. And just like before, the easiest way to apply glue is to just simply rock this up about the width of the nozzle of your glue gun. And then we'll place a bead of glue right where it meets up with the fuselage on both sides. And then we'll press it back down into place. And then confirm that it's perpendicular. Now included in our kit, you're gonna get some barbecue skewers that look just like this. This is gonna be for some added reinforcement for your tail to give it even more durability and also a real classic look. The easiest way to install these is we're gonna find the little tiny hole that's pointed right here. We're gonna press that through, and we're gonna carefully, with the twisting motion, we're just gonna seat it halfway through the surface of the rudder. Again, we're gonna come back, check for perpendicular, and if you do have an issue where maybe your tail is a little bit crooked, this is a real easy way to be able to correct that slightly. But don't worry, even if it's not perfect, this plane will still fly fantastic. And we're gonna do the same process on the other side here. And I'm just gonna place a dot, just press a little bit of glue down in there. Once both sides are installed and everything is perpendicular, simply lock the barbecue skewer in with a little drop of glue on each joint. Now once this is fully dry, you can easily take a pair of side cuts or even a razor blade, do a couple score cuts on both sides, and then crack it off. Reinforce the bottom half with a little drop of glue right over the joint, and you're all done. All right friends, our Scout XL fuselage is now done. We're ready to move on to the next video in this build series, and that's gonna be the wings. We'll see you there.